Am I the ass? My mom feels my sister should have married my husband instead of me. I am upset at my mom and my sister because of something my mother said, but everyone around me feels I am overreacting. Please be brutally honest in telling me if I am being insecure or if my mom and my husband are wrong in this. Let me give you a bit of backstory. My husband James, 34 male, and I, 29 female, were neighbors growing up. My sister Fran, 34 female, was in the same grade as my husband growing up. Everyone knew my sister in school because she is very smart and beautiful. James had a huge crush on her, and all of us knew about it. He asked her out for senior prom, and Fran shot him down in front of the whole school. They still remained friends, but he moved to a different state for college, and we did not hear much from him, except see him when he came back for holidays. James and I were never friends growing up, since I was in middle school when this happened. In fact, I was much younger than both of them, and they would actively avoid me or involving me in their hangouts and activities. I went to a good college and got my first job in the same city as James. My mom suggested I should contact James, since I did not know anyone there. We became friends, and 3 years later, we got married. We both have high-paying jobs and love our life. We moved back to our hometown during COVID as James's mom had health issues, and our jobs allowed us to work remotely. Fran also had a pretty good life. She married when she was 23, and her husband was pretty well off. 2 years ago, Fran discovered that he was cheating on her for almost the entire duration of their marriage, with multiple partners, and she decided to break things off. Fran moved back with my mom. Fran had not worked for the entire duration of their marriage, and was expecting to gain significant alimony from the divorce. However, due to complications regarding prenup, she barely got anything, and is struggling financially. She got a job but is barely able to afford her own place and continues living with my mom. James and I were very supportive of her during the whole process. Since James and Fran were friends growing up, they both have a special bond. They have their inside jokes and stories, and I sometimes feel like a third wheel when we all meet. However, James keeps his distance and has never given me any reason to believe that he has lingering feelings for her. Fran, on the other hand, constantly visits us, like 2 to 3 times a week, and ends up staying for dinner and sleeping in our guest room. I don't mind her coming over, but I do not like the fact that she talks more to James than with me. Also, she always comes over when I am not at home, and I often find them sitting next to each other on sofa and watching TV when I get home. It sort of reminds me of my childhood where I was locked out of our basement when Fran had friends over, and I would feel left out. Fran is also too comfortable around James and walks around the house in just a towel after her shower when James is around, or sleep in her underwear in guest room without locking the door. I have voiced my concerns to her, but she says that we are family, and she does not care. I have also voiced my concerns to James, and he does make efforts now to explain stories and inside jokes if Fran makes them. The main issue happened this weekend. I was hanging out with my mom and Fran last weekend, and Fran was recollecting stories about how James would do her homework and do chores for her growing up. She said, "He was so much in love with me, and I felt guilty taking advantage of him." My mom jokingly said to her that I wish you had the wits to marry James, then your loser husband, and you would have not been in this situation. Fran smiled after hearing that and nodded, but I was hurt by the comment. I protested to my mom that James is my husband, and I do not want her to make such comments about him. My mom doubled down and said that she feels like it because both James and I are high earners, while Fran is struggling. So it would make sense if Fran was married to James, and I would be fine since I do not need James to support me financially. She kept on saying that it was hypothetical and just wants both her daughters to be happy. I did not like those comments and told them to not speak like that about James and my marriage in general. Fran chimed in and told me that I should not take the comments so personally, and I am being too sensitive. However, I had a fight with both of them, and I left. When I came home and told James, he also sided with my mom and Fran and told me that her mom just made a harmless joke. I also raised the issue of Fran's behavior around our house, and he told me that this is between me and my sister, and he is not going to tell Fran about what she can or cannot wear in our house. However, I am just feeling really bad since the situation, and despite everyone apologizing to me, things just don't feel right. Am I wrong here in reacting the way I did, or does everyone else have a point, and I should be more secure about my relationship with James? Update. Thanks everyone for all your support on my previous post. To summarize what happened, my mom made a really off-putting comment that she wished my sister Fran was married to my husband James. I got really mad, and my husband also tried to undermine my feelings and told me I was overreacting to a harmless joke. Sorry for the long post, but a lot of you were messaging me for update and wanted me to tell what happened. The comments really made me paranoid, and I did see everyone's point that James may have just married me because of his crush on Fran. This really shot up my anxiety, and I started snooping around. My husband literally makes me check his phone for new messages when he is not around. So, I knew there was nothing to hide there. However, I was spooked by how my sister always knows when I am not at home, and why James and Fran are always sitting on the same couch when I come home. I tried talking to my husband, and he told me that my feelings were valid. However, he also said that Fran is going through a tough time and refused to say anything bad about my mom and Fran. Last Friday, I went to gym as usual in the evening, and when I came home, Fran was sitting in the living room, while James was cooking dinner. I got a bit angry and asked her what she was doing here. She said she had no plans for the night, and she came to hang out with us. It really annoyed me, and I told her that I wanted to spend a quiet weekend with my husband, that she can come some other time. She could see I was upset. She started talking about how our mom was just being silly, and I needed to let it go since it was just a joke. I told her I did not find it funny, and we got into a fight. She said that I was always an insecure, annoying kid. No wonder no one liked me. It really hurt me, but James stepped in and told Fran that she needs to leave. I have never seen James be so forceful with Fran. Fran muttered some unpleasant things to James and then left. I was in tears by the end of the whole thing, and James was consoling me. I was really upset and spent the night in our room, alone. In the morning, I prepared notes on all the things I wanted to ask James. Your comments really helped me get my thoughts straight. I know I was being very insecure, but after reading the comments, I really started questioning if James really married me for me, or just because I was Fran's sister and looked like her. People called me Dollar Store Fran in high school. James and I had a long conversation, and I told him my anxieties and insecurities. I told him how it makes me feel that he spends so much time with Fran when she visits us, and they have their own inside jokes. I asked him if he still has feelings for her. He was calm and smiling the whole time. He told me that he will tell me the truth, but does not want me to hate him for it later. He said that he knows Fran used him all through their school days, because she knew he liked her. When he went to college, Fran still tried to keep in touch with him, but putting distance between them made him realize how badly she treated him, and he decided to just cut contact with her so that he can work on himself. That was the reason he rarely visited us when he used to come for holidays and stopped being friends with Fran. I told him that it bothered me that he chose Fran before me and ignored me during our childhood. That was the reason I always had that doubt if I was his second choice. He said that I was 13 when he went to college, and if he would have liked me instead of Fran at that age, we would be having a different problem. He told me that when I contacted him, he thought that I must be like Fran and was not very enthusiastic to meet me. However, after we hung out a few times, he realized I was nothing like Fran. We soon became close, started dating and got married after a few years. He told me that Fran was married by then, and he saw that I always put Fran on the pedestal and would get jealous when Fran posted vacation pictures or the new shiny things her husband bought for her. That was the reason he never told me that he does not like hanging around Fran, as he feels that for me, Fran was always the North Star. He told me that he has always kept his distance from Fran, and she was a non-issue since we would meet her only few times every year. However, after her divorce, he did not know how to act. He said that he was grateful to me for uprooting our lives and moving back to our hometown for his mom's health. He wanted to do the same and take care of my family. When Fran got divorced, he supported her in every way he could for me, even though he realized it meant spending a lot of time with her and listening to her bring up all the memories from high school that he wants to forget. I told him it bothered me that Fran came to our house as often as she does, and generally in evenings when I go to gym. He told me that he also finds it odd that she knows my gym routine and always comes on evenings when I am not at home. However, he told me that he has always kept his distance from her, and if she did anything that would raise an alarm, he would have told me immediately. She just makes him watch all the old movies or TV shows they watched growing up and gossips endlessly about their high school friends. He told me I need to trust him, and if I want him to be the bad guy and ask Fran to not visit us often, he can do that for me. However, he knows that I will eventually make up with my mom and Fran and does not want them to blame him for being mean to Fran. However, he told me he will not tell Fran what to wear around the house, as it would be creepy if it came from him. I felt I got all the assurance I needed from James, and I will never doubt how amazing of a husband he has been. My mom and Fran visited us on Sunday, and my mom profusely apologized to me. She told me she does not want me to feel bad for her comment, and she would never wish anything bad on my marriage. She meant to say that James was a great guy, and she hopes Fran can find someone like him one day. Fran was a bit sour, but apologized to us for all the name-calling on Friday and told us that it's just her hormones. She said that she likes hanging out with her sister and her best friend, and hence comes to our house. I told her she is welcome to come anytime she wants, but to call ahead of time in case James and I have plans for the evening, and she agreed. I really want to move past this issue, but I do want to put some firm boundaries on when Fran can come to our house and hang out with James alone, as I know it bothers him too. Overall, I feel things are good now. I am glad my worst fears did not come true, but I do feel I need some therapy in order to deal with my insecurities. Also, I am reading all your comments. Thanks for all your love. James and I have already discussed to put more boundaries regarding Fran and strategies on how to avoid her when she comes over uninvited.
A threesome led to the end of my 20 female first marriage. My new fiancé, 29 male, doesn't know the whole story. How do I tell him? I got married to my high school boyfriend young. I was only 22 at the time. I would have liked to have waited longer, but I got pregnant, so we got married. My ex was my first boyfriend, first kiss, first sex, first everything. And I was the same for him. So about 3 years into our marriage, my husband, now ex, began to hint about spicing up our sex life as it had become rather dull. He suggested a threesome, and I assumed he meant with another girl. I declined because I'm really not into girls, but what he actually had in mind was another guy. Turns out one of his secret kinks was watching me with another man. I again declined, said I wasn't interested, but he was persistent, and eventually wore me down. If I'm being honest, I was a little curious, having only been with one guy my whole life. So I agreed. We found a guy online and set the whole thing up. I won't go into details on the whole event, but I had the best sex of my life that night. My ex seemed to enjoy himself as well, and meeting up with this guy, we will call him Tim, became a regular occurrence. Things were good for a while, but turned bad in a hurry. My ex grew jealous of Tim, and I began to question our relationship. Eventually my ex told me that we were done seeing Tim, and when I said I didn't want to, that was the beginning of the end for us. We tried to make it work for the sake of our daughter, but we were broken at that point. We got divorced, and I ended up dating Tim for a while, but that ended when I realized we really weren't compatible outside of the bedroom. Fast forward 3 years, and I am engaged. We will call my fiancé Alex, and I haven't told him exactly what led to my divorce. He knows I left my husband for another man, but I left out the rest of it. I'm ashamed of the whole thing, and really don't want Alex to see me that way. I really love my fiancé. I don't think I knew what real love was until I met him, but I'm terrified of what he will think of me if he knows all of my past. I'm also not 100% certain my ex won't let any of this slip out. The divorce wasn't smooth, and there have been many fights over custody. My ex is also pretty jealous of Alex as well. My ex has photos and videos of me and Tim, and I'm not sure he's above sending it to Alex. He hasn't yet, but he has threatened it when we fight. I'm in a bind and need some advice. Update. I can't create a new post for some reason, so I will update here. So I told my fiancé last night. Overall, he took it well, but he did have a lot of uncomfortable questions that I really didn't want to answer. But I decided that I was done lying and hiding the truth, so I answered everything honestly. Alex had never really pressed me for a lot of detail on what happened with my ex. I told him that I fell for another man I met and realized there was something wrong in my marriage. I told Alex that it was a mistake and I was ashamed of how I behaved, and he just left it at that. So now he wanted the whole story and every detail. Alex was mostly interested in what I was thinking throughout the entire ordeal. He wanted to know what made me choose Tim and why he was the only one I ever slept with. The answer to that was that I wanted it to be just one guy at a time for safety. We both talked with Tim for a little while before we decided to go with him. We also ran a background check, just to be certain the guy wasn't a felon. As for why I chose Tim, I didn't lie and said it was purely physical attraction. Tim was tall and fit, just a great body from top to bottom. He asked what about Tim made our time together so good. I told him that it was really the taboo and the thrill that made it as good as I thought it was. I only learned that after I started dating Tim. The sex was still really good after we started officially dating, but it wasn't the mind-blowing experience it was initially. Alex asked if I was completely over Tim and if we still had any contact. Me and Tim haven't spoken in 2 years. After we broke up, we continued to have sex every now and then. But when I met Alex, I stopped it. Tim would text me early in our relationship, inviting me over for sex, which I always declined. I blocked him after he sent me a pic of his, one night while I was sitting next to Alex. We haven't had any contact since. Alex asked if my feelings changed for my ex because I had better sex with Tim. But that wasn't the case. The sex was bad with my ex because I was no longer attracted to him. I'm not sure I was ever very attracted to him, actually. I was 15 when we met. He was older and gave me tons of compliments, told me how pretty I was. So we started dating, and I liked having a boyfriend, so we stayed together. I eventually got pregnant, so we got married. Tim just made me realize that I wasn't very attracted to my ex, and I ultimately agreed to stop seeing Tim while we went to counseling, but my ex just couldn't get over that I wanted to keep seeing him. I admitted that I never really had good sex and was initially resistant to giving it up. I am ashamed of that, but agreeing to stop immediately wouldn't have saved our marriage. My ex was very jealous by that point, obsessed really, and we were already fighting a lot. The marriage was dead from the first time I had sex with another man. Probably before, but definitely then. The whole ordeal really did destroy my ex, and I feel terrible about that. My ex initially wanted full custody of my daughter, but we settled on shared custody. But he eventually just stopped picking our daughter up. He became unstable, and I now have full custody. My ex doesn't see our daughter very much anymore. It's really sad. And although he isn't blameless in all this, it is mostly my fault. I'm not that person anymore, and I truly am ashamed of how I behaved. Finally, Alex asked if I was satisfied with our sex life, and if in the future, if things grew stale, would I want someone else. I told him that I am more than satisfied with our sex life. I'm obsessed with Alex and insanely attracted to him. Now, I'm sure at some point when we get older, our sex life may get a little stale. But there are ways to spice up your sex life without having sex with another guy. My experience with that has permanently soured me on that type of thing. Alex did have a problem with my ex having the videos of me and Tim, but he doesn't know what to do about it. He also has no desire to see them, so I'm relieved about that too. So we are okay, and I just want to tell anyone that is considering something like this with their partner to really think it through before you go through with it. I learned that the hard way.
Will I be the asshole for telling my wife to show me her phone after I got an email accusing her of cheating? I, male 47, have a comfortable and fulfilling life. I have a job I truly enjoy, I live in a nice suburb, and am blessed with 3 wonderful children, male 8, female 6, female 4, and a lovely wife, Emily, 45. I've always felt Emily and I were an ideal match. However, a recent email I received has deeply unsettled me and planted a seed of doubt in my mind. Emily lived in the UK between 2010 and 2015, during which time she pursued a PhD. Because she lived there so long, she developed many close friendships and has made it a point to return every couple of years to maintain those ties. This past August, she traveled to the UK for 3 weeks to attend the wedding of one of her close friends. After some consideration, we agreed that it would be best for me and the children to remain at home, as I could not take that much time away from work, and the children were unlikely to find much enjoyment in such an event. Emily departed, returned as expected, and life returned to normal for us. Last week, I received an email on my work email address. It was supposedly from the wife of Emily's friend. I'll call him Jake, male 44. According to this woman, she has a very strong reason to suspect that Jake and Emily engaged in an affair. She listed off her suspicions, noting Jake had picked Emily up from the airport, spent considerable time at her hotel, and how the two of them frequently went out to dinner alone. She even included pictures of my wife's earrings that she said she found in Jake's pockets when she was doing the laundry, and pictures of a lipstick stain on his shirt. The color is one I recognize as something Emily often wears. There is some other evidence she listed off. For the sake of conciseness, I will not include them here. All this was a lot to absorb, and for a while I thought it was some sort of joke, so I tried my best to ignore it, but it kept coming back into my mind. I remember that before her trip, my wife would talk to all her friends there. I don't know if this email is influencing my memory, but I think she probably spoke with Jake the most. Additionally, I know Emily never liked Jake's wife, though I can't say why. I've never pried into Emily's phone or social media accounts before, but I feel very tempted to now. However, I know I'd feel terrible if I looked and found nothing. Also, if I start acting suspicious, wouldn't she just delete everything out of fear of being found out? I am unsure of how to move forward and would welcome any guidance on handling this. The best I can currently come up with is asking to see her phone immediately after confronting her about it, so as to not give her no time to delete anything, though part of me thinks this would upset her and potentially not even show anything. Will I be the asshole for telling my wife to show me her phone after I got an email accusing her of cheating? Edit. I forgot to include, my wife no longer has these earrings. She wasn't wearing them when she returned, and when I asked, she said she lost them. Update. A few hours after sharing my first post, I confronted Emily. She confirmed my fears. She claims she's in love with Jake and can't live a lie any longer. She still claims to love me and the kids but says she can't stay with us any longer. According to her, she was waiting for a better time to tell me and the children. Apparently, this has been going on since March, with Jake flying out here occasionally and Emily secretly meeting him. We're getting divorced. Emily is moving to the UK soon. She confirmed that in August, in addition to the wedding, she attended a job interview, and she's set to start around the new year. She's already applied for a British visa. She plans to live with Jake once she moves. As for custody, Emily is voluntarily surrendering her chance of full custody. She doesn't want to uproot the kids, so they'll stay here in Canada with me. There's a part of me that appreciates that decision, but there's also the part that is astonished at how easily she's walking away. She wants to pay child support, but I'd rather raise my children without her financial influence. That said, the court will likely insist on support, regardless of my feelings. Emily is also seeking structured visitation rights, which, given the circumstances, will likely be granted. Based on what I've been told, the court generally leans toward arrangements that allow both parents to maintain relationships with the children, even when one is relocating to a different country. The lawyers are still working out the details, but it seems she'll have visitation during school breaks and holidays, with the possibility of virtual calls in between. I've been keeping things as amicable as possible, and the more cooperative I am, the more Emily seems to agree with my demands. We are also discussing the future of our home. Emily has expressed a desire to sell the property and divide the proceeds. While I am reluctant to part with the family home, it is unlikely I have much of a choice since it was bought during our marriage. For now, our lawyers are still working through the details, and no final decisions have been made. Given the situation, it could be a good while before we reach a resolution. In the meantime, I've been advised not to make any major financial moves. As much as I want to stay here with the children, I know selling is most likely inevitable. As of this writing, Emily is in an Airbnb and Jake has flown here to stay with her. They plan on traveling to the UK at some point in the near future. My lawyer tells me that adultery isn't grounds for special treatment when it comes to custody or property division. Therefore, it won't influence how assets are divided unless marital funds are directly involved. Emily likely used money from her personal account. Unless it can be proven she used our joint finances to fund the affair, it's unlikely this will make any difference in court. I have been in regular communication with Jake's soon-to-be ex-wife, Eleanor, primarily through email, and more recently, we've spoken over the phone a few times. Eleanor apologized, saying she felt guilty for telling me about the affair and worried that if she hadn't, maybe my marriage could have been salvaged. I reassured her that, for me, the gravity of the situation made divorce inevitable, and I'd rather not remain in the dark about something of this significance. She even sent me messages and other evidence of their relationship, but since Emily is openly admitting to the affair, it doesn't really matter in the context of the law. Eleanor has also told me a lot about Jake. Apparently, this is the third time he's cheated on her, and she's had enough. There's no chance of reconciliation this time, she says, and he doesn't seem interested in trying. She mentioned that Jake has zero desire to raise children who are not biologically his, which explains why Emily's not fighting for custody. Eleanor's divorce will most likely be much longer and more drawn out than mine, given that both her and Jake want full custody of their children and can't agree on several other issues. I haven't had much time to process everything. These past 2 weeks have felt like a blur in every way. But one thing I can say with certainty is that I have nothing left for Emily. Not because she betrayed our marriage, but because of how easily she's walking away from our children. I never thought I could hate someone I once loved so much. It's a strange feeling. The hardest part in all of this is the children. My 2 youngest daughters have started asking why their mother isn't around as much anymore, and it's been very difficult trying to communicate with them about the nature of the situation. My eldest seems to understand a little more, and as a result, he has become quiet and withdrawn. I'm fortunate to have a family that has been incredibly supportive so far. My children have received numerous thoughtful letters from some of their cousins, which I've been reading to them each night. All my siblings have also sent gifts for the kids, and one of my brothers, along with his wife, drove up to visit over the past weekend. My sister-in-law even prepared plenty of food, some of which is still in the freezer. They also kept the children entertained while I met with my lawyer. My other siblings have also offered to come by and look after the kids whenever I need them. Beyond that, my parents have been calling daily to check in on us, and my 78-year-old mother has already made plans to stay with us for 2 weeks in November to help around the house. The collective effort of my family has made this experience much more bearable, and I'm deeply grateful for all their support. To everyone who encouraged me to speak with Emily after my last post, I'm grateful. I was tempted to ignore Eleanor's message, but it kept gnawing at me. Your advice gave me the courage to act. Emily has shown herself to be a liar, and I have no doubt that her idea of a better time was simply when it would cause the least inconvenience for her and Jake.
Am I the asshole for telling my wife that my life would be better without her? My wife, Anne, and I have been married for 13 years. I am 43 and she is 46. We do not have children. When we first began dating, nobody could make me happy like Anne. She always seemed to know exactly the right thing to say to me when I was down. But over the past decade or so, she has really started to show her true colors, and a lot of what her ex-husband said to me about her has begun to make more sense. For example, I have a very high-stress job. People bring me problems, and I fix those problems. But when I get home, 9 times out of 10, Anne just has more problems to throw onto my plate. She doesn't work, so she's free to do anything she wants to solve said problems during the day. But lately, she has even begun making lists of things that she wants me to do after I work all day. But my biggest issue with Anne is that I can't ever really open up to her about anything. Whenever I talk about something bad that happened to me, she'll either try to one-up me or agree with the person who wronged me. Last Friday, I had a horrible day. There was an enormous problem at work that basically all fell on my shoulders to solve. When I was crossing the street after work, I had a green signal, and a bicycle blew through a red and side-clipped me. The cyclist yelled expletives at me and then rode away. I thought about calling the police because it was technically a hit and run, but there was probably nothing they could do. When I got home, desperate, I talked to Anne about what happened. She listened, and then immediately took the cyclist's side. I reiterated that the cyclist ran through a red light, to which she responded that cyclists aren't obligated to stop. When I told her she was wrong and tried to put the issue to rest, she began frantically Googling laws. She found that in our state, they can treat lights like a stop sign. She began triumphantly reading the law to me loudly, word for word, getting louder when I kept trying to tell her that I wasn't interested. At the end of her spiel, she gave me this incredibly arrogant look as if she was right. I just stared at her for a second and said that my life would be better without her. She got incredibly upset, shrieked at me until her voice was hoarse, and then packed a bag and left to stay with her parents. She has texted me all weekend demanding an apology, but I haven't responded. Did I do something unforgivable here? Update. 2 weeks ago, I had an argument with my wife, Anne. This argument stemmed from Anne's incessant need to contradict me and everything I say. Anne left in a fit of rage to stay with her parents, and then kept spamming me with texts demanding an apology. A few days after Anne left, I felt something I hadn't in a long time at home: peace. I didn't have someone nagging me about literally everything I did. I didn't have to eat my meals in the correct order, something about pH balance that she probably saw from some brain rot creator on TikTok. I didn't have to wash my feet after getting home. I could actually enjoy myself, which is impossible when Anne is around, because I found many years ago that she tends to get the most aggressive when I seem like I'm either in a very good or very bad mood. I then did something I never thought I'd do. I reached out to her ex. He was more than eager to talk about Anne and her shenanigans, so we met up for drinks. He and I both had near-identical experiences with her. Anne is, through and through, a pretty horrible person, especially to her romantic partners. He cited irreconcilable differences for divorcing her, where it was no specific event, but just a long list of terrible interactions and coming to the realization that he detested her as a person. During this time, Anne went silent on me. I used this lull in our relationship to visit a lawyer, who told me that due to the nature of laws in our state and the fact that Anne is able-bodied and educated, the chances of me ever having to pay alimony are basically zero. I called Anne at that point. She, for some reason, still expected an apology. I told her that I wanted a divorce. She threatened to take everything from me. I said she could try, but any further contact should be done through my lawyer. I'm fully happy to split our assets fairly. I'm fairly sure that Anne will agree to any deal that gives her more than half. It's just the way she is. And if it's a 55-45 split, I don't care. All I'll have to do is act like she got the better of me. And since she's an idiot, she'll happily agree. Thanks to everyone who responded in the last post with advice. Tons of you suggested divorce, which I think was what actually got me to consider it seriously.